Good morning, everybody. Monica, thank you very much for inviting me. The August panelists, friends, I think, uh, this session brings the importance of why we all are talking about climate change and decarbonization. But let me start. We all know in 2015, world leaders met at Paris and made a pledge to contain the temperature rise, limiting to 1.5 degrees centigrade. That was in 2015, almost 10 years before. Today, we have crossed 1.5 degree scenario. With current policies, what exists in the world, we are heading towards more than 3 degrees centigrade. The target was set to reduce almost 42% emissions by 2030. That means from this year, more than 7% reductions every year. That was the target. What is the fact? The temperature is increasing, or the greenhouse gas emission is increasing by more than 1.5 degrees centigrade. That's the situation. But I don't want to start today's morning with a pessimistic note, because believe me, I'm an optimist. And I come from an industry, specifically steel industry. We also produce cement and energy. And I consider specifically the steel industry has an urgent business actions to reduce emissions and to be in the path to meet the target what we had set in 2015 at Paris Agreement. Why I say so? Globally, if you see, this sector is contributing more than 7% of emissions, but the contribution to GDP is around 0.7%. In India, the difference is quite stark. Although we contribute more than 2% to GDP directly, the steel industry, but the emission contribution is more than 12%. So the contribution to economy and contribution to climate change is disproportionate. So therefore, believe me it or not, who are in the steel industry or specifically in industrial sector, the pressure is going to increase. Therefore, we need to take urgent actions to decouple the emissions and the economic growth. So with this preamble, let me come to the subject that we are going to debate the whole day. And I was given that carbon capture, carbon trading schemes, and India's green steel rating, how they are going to meet those objectives to decouple the emissions from the economic growth. They call we are into a sector which is hard to abate. And I believe that we need to change this narrative and focus on considering steel, cement, chemicals, fertilizer, all this sector to priority to abate sector so that our mindset change and we remain focused. That's the first point of mindset change is required. We also understand that we have to find reductions of emissions to be viable financially, otherwise, believe me, nobody is going to do. So therefore, we need to have an action or strategy that is viable financially in the initial stage, and as the technology matures, it becomes financially viable and adoption becomes at scale. Even if we do everything in steel sector, we all understand steel sector cannot diverge from carbon emissions, because steel is also known as carbon steel. So therefore, carbon is needed to make iron to steel. And that is where our sector will left with residual emissions. And that residual emission necessarily has to be managed through the technology called carbon capture and storage. Utilizations will form economy lever in between, where currently we must focus, because if you look at carbon capture is an established technology and it's running everywhere, it is technically feasible. The question is, once we capture the carbon, what we do with that? We need to find a commercial viable solution to utilize fast, and then at the end, storage has to be the solutions. Otherwise, this sector, along with those difficult to abate sectors, will not be able to achieve the net zero pledges. That's my take on carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And just for the knowledge of the audience, I want to say that even at JSW Steel, we are successfully running a carbon capture utilization project since so many years, I think more than 20 years, and those are financially viable. So we have an example here. Now we are working on the newest scaled up technology, have signed MOU with BHP and Carbon Clean. Carbon Clean, one of the leader in carbon capture, to put into 300 CDR max new technology and test that. So that's my take on carbon capture utilization and its role in the steel sector and also all this hard to abate sector. The second point, I think we are going to debate much on the carbon market in this conference today. We all understand carbon market is a financially viable model to decarbonize the sector by taking advantage of spreading the decarbonization to various sectors. And I think Government of India has taken a very welcome step by bringing in CCTS early into India. And I'm very hopeful that cap and trade mechanism is going to unlock some of those technology where it is financially viable to scale up and offset those emissions in those sector or plants or units or technology where it is not viably feasible. I have only two requests and ask, and I want to make that from this podium, that when we do CCTS, the price of carbon has to be just and appropriate. And that is only possible when you make a balance between supply and demand. We have seen cap and trade mechanism working very successfully in Europe, but we also have seen it is struggling in some of the geography. The reason because the demand is far less than the supply. We have seen in India in the energy market as well. So my urge will be, government has to have right policies to make a balance between supply and demand. And in my view, demand has to be more than the supply, so the carbon market, the carbon price will be substantial to drive those changes. And specifically when it comes to sectoral target setting, because it is all depends on what target you are set to decarbonize. And in the target setting, my submission will be, the target should be for the sector as a whole, not to the individual installations or the plants to achieve. Because by that, you will encourage newer technology to flow in. That's my view on carbon capture and technology. But anyway, I'm very supportive of the carbon market, and we must work towards making this success. The third point was related to green steel taxonomy that Monica has given 3 points for this panel to discuss. Again, I want to congratulate Ministry of Steel, Government of India, to become the first country in the world to at least have a taxonomy about green steel. Many times I keep on discussing with our customers and asking me, can you provide us green steel? I always tell, yes, we can. But can you tell me what do you mean? So every stakeholder in this market are divided and different understanding about that green steel. And therefore, a unified taxonomy was essential. In fact, there is a report by WTO that brings out there are 28 various international standards defining how the green steel is. And that creates confusion in the market. And in that sense, bringing out a taxonomy to give a unified understanding, at least in India, is a very welcome step. And they have brought in star rating. I hope this will succeed with a demand projections and regulations to mandate demand by putting mandated obligations to procure those star rated steel. Otherwise, taxonomy will not have any meaning. So I'm hoping it will come soon. Government of India already made a draft. So let us all look forward to achieve that. And in this sense, I also should address that, inform you all, JSW Steel being the largest steel company in India, we are taking a lead into this market. Besides working on putting a dedicated low emission steel plant, which we plan to have by 2030, to start with a 4 million ton steel plant, in between, we are giving options to the customer who are interested to have low emission steel. We recently launched a brand called Green Age. And this Green Age is based on the guideline provided by World Steel Association, and it follows a chain of custody model, which is called book and claim. Those who are interested can discuss with me offline. We'll explain them, but we are providing those options. So with these 3 points I'm addressing, I wish all the best and success for the today's discussion and conference. Thank you very much.